Welcome once again to the J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me on this artistic adventure. Today we'll be working with ink, pen and ink. So have your kneaded eraser, a number 2 or an HB pencil handy, and any type of ink that you would like to use. But make sure that it's archival, that it's permanent, that it's black, and a smooth ink. I probably recommend a Pigma Micron pen. They come in various colors and sizes. And let's start doing some ink drawing.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being willing to draw. Ink is kind of intimidating. I realize that, and so I'm going to just take it and show you my technique of drawing with ink. I like to start out with my number 2 pencil and just figure out where everything goes. I mean, half this paper should be his tail down in here somewhere. And so the other half is going to be his little rounded body and his head kind of tucked up here in the corner. So you may want to start out and just say, well, somewhere up in here, about that size, is his head. And maybe that's a little bit too big. Maybe I can make that a little smaller. Nothing is perfect. And remember, this is kind of like drawing with stick figures. You're just figuring out where everything goes. You can come in and say, well, his little body's over here somewhere. I want it almost touching that edge over there. So maybe I'm going to kind of move it out till it almost touches that edge. So maybe I want it right here. And his back and his head are almost the same level. His head is just slightly higher. So there's a little bit of an angle there for his head. This is called proportioning. And it's just basic shapes. We start out with basic shapes. I can't even see his legs in there. There's a tree branch that he's sitting on. You can even throw in that tree branch if you wanted to. And then the rest of this is his tail. It kind of comes down and curls around. So there's his tail, kind of come down around there. Remember, everything we're going to draw here gets erased. So you don't want to get attached to your drawing. You got it all figured out. Make sure that he almost touches 3 of the 4 sides. So his little ear is going to come up here and almost touch this one. His little backside's almost going to touch this one. His tail's almost going to touch this one. You want to make it big. Draw big. Always draw big. Utilize that entire paper. You don't want a little floating object in the middle of your page. And if you want to, at this point, you can say, well, maybe that log's going to go in there. All this other stuff, these little leaves and the little things that are in there, we can get those later. So what's most important? Where does our eye rest? Where do you kind of find yourself always going back to? What's the emphasis area? What do you think? His face? So that's what we want to spend a little bit of extra time doing. Here's his little jowls. Just a little circle there to just block in where that goes. His ears are just little triangles. So they're going to come out like this. Straight up from that other ear at that angle. There's his little nose, and his little mouth is in there somewhere. And his eyes are kind of close here. You got to kind of start putting it in, even if you put the eye in clear over here, and you're like, oh, wait, that's not right. That gives you a point of reference, and you can always move that over. That point of reference just helps us figure out where things are. So like even this little eye is too high. I've got to lower it. This one's got to come over here. Draw it first and then erase. Remember, everything we're going to draw here gets erased anyway. So it's not that big of a deal. Also notice that his off eye, if we zoom into his head here, that off eye is smaller. So this one's probably a little more round. This one's a little more oval because we're looking at it at an angle. And this is our emphasis area. This is where we want to spend most of our time. The rest of it, you can kind of be kind of speedy with it. But just make sure that the eyes and the nose and the mouth, the ears are in about the right place. his little arm is kind of tucked in here, and it's kind of hard to see, but you can kind of imagine that it just kind of comes in here and is kind of tucked in there. So now you just kind of want to keep adjusting, adjust until it looks about right. This is not intimidating because all this pencil gets erased. Now I can see where my nose is compared to this eye, and I got to move that nose over, because if you look at it, right below the eye there is where the nose starts over here. So now I've got to move my nose over a little bit. So remember, if you erase it before you redraw it, you lose your point of reference. So you redraw it and then erase. Now, hopefully, from last time you remember some of the techniques of drawing with ink. And if you want something to look soft and fuzzy, what do? You leave out a lot. The other thing, though, is you've got to have enough of the darkness here to get the color variation. So it might be helpful when we draw to change things to black and white. So you can easily do that. You can just go through, hit the color, get rid of any color, and maybe that'll help us a little bit. I need more space. The space between his haunches here and his head over here was a little bit greater than what I had, so I had to move it over a little bit. So now when you're ready, you can start anywhere you want to start. I like to start with the face, like the eyes. I know that if I can nail that, if I can get that down, then everything else is going to fall into place. So in order to do that, we're going to zoom into his head again, just to make sure that we get all the details, everything kind of the way we want to get it. I'm just going to start with some little dots and dashes, and you can start anywhere you want to start, but I'm going to just start above the eye. It's nice and round, so I'm just going to do some little dots and dashes. There's a little shine in his eye, so I'm just going to put this little half moon for his pupil. I want to keep that little highlight fairly well in there, so I'm just going to kind of hatch through there. Keep that little bit of light on the outside, and there's your eye. We may need to go back into that and do it a little bit darker here and there, but here's some fur. Now, if you do your line with little short strokes where you kind of flip it, and this is a little practice thing. This doesn't come immediately, but just little soft strokes in the direction that the hair goes. And if you notice with animals, kind of starts with the middle of the head, and these will come out this way, and these will come out this way. And so you just do these little strokes, very soft. I'm hardly touching the paper at all. You can go away or towards yourself, but they're just little soft strokes. Here's the outside of his little jowls, and we don't want to draw a line there. We're just going to define it with these little dark edges. Just very soft. And notice I didn't draw a line there, but you can see the edge of his little jowl. And if that's not quite right, it's like our sphere. We can go back into it. We can round it out. We can smooth it out with just little edges, little lines. I'm ready to do his nose now. So his nose is just little hatched lines in that shape of that nose. And if you wanted to, you could go in and draw it with your pencil. But I kind of see where it is, so I'm just going to go in and just kind of hatch through it. There's his nose. And then you just keep refining it. Some of it goes a little darker, so the tip of his nose is a little darker. So I'm just going to hatch through that, keep hatching through it until you're happy with it. And they're just little tiny hatched lines. There's his mouth, little hatched lines. Keep it soft, keep it smooth. I'm barely touching the paper. If it's a little darker, hatch through it. And you don't have to go the same direction. You can go different directions. You ready for his other eye? Here's his other eye. It's just going to just come across. It's about the same level. I'm going to do the same thing. Little hatched lines that go around the eye. I'm not drawing a line, one line, a whole bunch of little lines, or dots or dashes. Here's his pupil. Remember, there's a little shine across the pupil. That little eye that we drew, the human eye, even animal eyes are very similar. I'm going to hatch through it. Just little dots and dashes, and you got it. Where that dark area is, I'm just going to hatch through that with these little lines. Now, had I drawn a line there, I'd be stuck with that line. But I don't know if you've noticed, but I have to go out a little bit. Even his nose needs to go a little bit broader. So I'm just going to add more dots and dashes. Some of that really light fur, I'm just going to leave that out. All this stuff right in here, I'm going to leave that out and maybe just do a little bit on the edge over here. Just a little bit. Keep it soft and fuzzy. Remember, if you want something to look soft, you kind of leave out some things. And if you think, oh, it's too white, you need a little bit of something else in there, you can add a dot or a dash or a little line here and there just to darken it up a little bit. His ears are very soft. There's nothing wrong with leaving out a lot of that, but you need at least a little bit in there. But keep it at a minimum. Don't do a lot in there. There's that ear. And if we got rid of our graphite, which I like getting rid of the graphite, that cleans that up, makes it much nicer. Here's the inside of the ear. And you probably notice too, as I go through, all my lines are not going in the same direction. Some flip up, some flip down. That is a little bit of a practice thing. It's not something you conscious or subconsciously do. You have to consciously do this. Here's the top of his head, just little kind of lines here and there. You could do little dots and dashes too if you want, but just leave it soft. Right in here, I'm going to just leave that out completely because it's very light and soft. Don't draw too much. Again, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I got to leave things out. Just let it go. I think that's the key to this. I think too many times we want to draw every little hair, every little detail. You don't need to. It's better if you don't. Some of this longer hair is out to the side here. You can use a little bit longer line. And again, it's that little flip line. Sometimes you just need some little dots and dashes. Don't need a lot. Here we're going to use the back of his neck to kind of define this part of his ear. It's fairly dark in there, so we can do that. I'm looking at these eyes now thinking, oh, those eyes can go a little darker. They're pretty dark. So maybe I want to hatch through them again. Maybe go the other way. I like to get rid of the graphite. The graphite just looks muddy. So once I've figured out where everything goes, then I can get rid of that graphite. And here's his fur, just very light. I'm barely touching the paper here. Try that. I know it feels weird, but it really does work. Now that we've done the important part, the head, the rest of it's going to fall into place. It's going to be pretty easy to do. So let's zoom out of him. And the rest of his body is done the same way. So here's the back, and again, it's that same thing. I'm just going to establish my edge with those feathered lines. If it's dark, like right in here where it's really dark, you can kind of figure out where you want to put it with these little hatched lines like this. And then once you got that all figured out, you can just hatch through it because you know it's going to be dark. So I'm just going to hatch through this. Hatch. Because I know that section's going to be dark anyway. So you just got to keep adding more and more line. So might as well add some darkness to begin with. Again, we can come back into this later if we need to, which we probably will. I want to get the rest of him in there. And his tail, remember his tail is very soft, very fluffy. So just go ahead and use some of those really thin, feathery lines. Don't have them all going in the same direction. Flip some up, flip some down, but just very few lines, just nice and soft. We can come back into this and do more later. The tree trunk is kind of hard, so you can use a little bit more line in there. And it's got a lot of texture, so it doesn't have to be smooth. You can go in and just use kind of scribbly lines to get that tree trunk in there. Now I can get rid of all my graphite. Sometimes that graphite gets on your hand and it smears. I just like to get rid of it as soon as I can. Now with all that graphite gone, I'm free to kind of explore more with my pen. The farther you get away from your face or from our emphasis area, the sketchier you can be. So I can kind of go in there and be kind of scribbly. within reason. I might want to do his tail right now just because it's so soft. So where it's grayer, you put more line. Where it's lighter, just leave it out. You can always come back in and put more in if you need to. I'm just scribbling in this darkness here. Just there's no not trying to get any kind of detail. It's just black and white. The more I work on the body, the more I look at the head and go, oh, okay, it needs to go darker too. So I can just go back into it. When you get ready to do the tree is just scribbling. Just kind of scribble through it because you want texture in there. If you want some of those branches that are in there, you can use kind of scribbly line to go up in there. And remember, they don't even need to attach to each other. This is like this doesn't even attach. Just leave it. Let it go. Here's a leaf. Here's another leaf. They're just scribbles. If you want those in there. You don't have to have them in there. Part of what defines his tail right here is the tree. So if you just do the tree and leave out the tail, it's going to be fine. So I'm just going to go through and hatch through the tree. Leave out the tail. And you defined it. There it is. Woohoo. Cool thing about ink drawing is it really is very relaxing. It's kind of therapeutic. I mean, once you get the important stuff done, like his little head, the rest of it just falls into place. Some of these really light areas, I probably had them going too light. But that's okay, because at the first, you don't know. When in doubt, leave it out. You can always come back in and add more. Most of the time, the whiskers you can kind of leave out, but if you want to, and they're very light, you can just do like this little thin line like that, and that's all you need. Just it's like a little broken line, and you don't need many of them. I mean, just a couple of them. Very light, very thin. That's all you need. Usually for whiskers, you can just leave them out. That's kind of one of the last things you do, because you just kind of look at it and go, do I need them? All right, I need them. And then you throw them in really quick. Sometimes, like when you're doing tigers and they have those big, very thick kind of white ones, but they go against the stripes, you just leave out spaces in the stripes, and everybody visually sees the whiskers. You don't really draw them in. So the last thing you want to do, we've got about 2 or 3 minutes left, and you're probably just scribbling through this, hurrying through it, and that's kind of what I'm doing. But the last thing you want to do is your signature, and a good place for a signature is like down by his tail or over here in the branches. It's kind of up to you. I'm going to just do mine down here. Hopefully you had fun. Hopefully you've done something today that you've never done before, and you've learned something about ink drawing. Hopefully what you learned is that it's not as difficult as it looks. It's all about scribbling in the right places and leaving things out, like those ears. Look how much we left out of those ears, but look how soft they look.